Hi guys, I just wanted to do a real quick newsletter and talk about the calendar that God gave to Moses back in the days of Sinai that is still totally pertinent today, and there are still people in the world that are keeping that very calendar to this day. Now, it's a very small handful of people. Even the Jews don't keep the calendar. The Jewish calendar is not the same as the correct Hebrew calendar that's kept the way that God instructed Moses to keep the calendar on Mount Sinai. But there are those who are keeping that calendar. I've put a little attachment to where you'll be able to get to that from this video. Either it will be attached to the email that I sent you for the newsletter, or it'll be on the page with a link to it. But anyway, let's talk about God's calendar that He gave to Moses. Now, we have a rare occurrence this year. Because this year, believe it or not, Easter Sunday is an actual holy day. It's not because Easter is actually holy. This year, it just so happens that Passover, according to God's ordained Hebrew calendar, happens to fall right on Easter Sunday. And that doesn't happen very often. Normally, there's a week's difference or even nearly a month's difference sometimes in where the Hebrew calendar falls, their first of the year, and the middle of their first month, which is when Passover always occurs according to God's ways. His true holy day is always right in the middle of the first month of the Hebrew year. The modern Jewish calendar does not calculate the calendar according to Moses, and neither, of course, our Gregorian calendars that we use do not. But it's very easy to keep a Hebrew calendar and a Gregorian calendar parallel, right, so that you can refer to both. And personally, you know, my calendar is one of those calendars that has both Gregorian and Hebrew. But you'll find yourself living according to the Hebrew calendar more than the Gregorian calendar, because the Hebrew calendar is in harmony with the earth and the moon and the stars. In the Hebrew calendar, the reason, and I will tell you why, Passover falls on Easter Sunday this year. It would not have. It would have been about a month prior to Easter Sunday this year. And most Judeo-Christian and Messianic Jews have already celebrated Passover this year, even though they knew that it was not the true Passover, because they had already set their celebrations. They had already, made their plans. And this year, at the end of the 12th month of the Hebrew calendar, the barley was not aviv, or green ripe, in the land of Israel. And the way God explained it to Moses, each year when the barley is aviv, and that is a term that means almost completely ripe. It's a specific term that means just turning from green to ripe as the barley and the wheat heads out. That's the condition of aviv. And God told Moses that with the first new moon, when the barley is aviv, that is the first month of the year. That is Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And so at the end of the 12th month of the last Hebrew year, the barley was not aviv. What do you do in that case? Well, God instructed Moses, when that occurs, add a 13th month. And when you add a 13th month to the end of the Hebrew year, for which all of the days are actually 30 days per month, what that does is it resets the calendar, just like a leap year resets the Gregorian calendar. Only it resets the Hebrew calendar forward an entire month. So once you've added an Adar Bet, which is, Adar is the 12th month of the Hebrew year, and Bet just means B. It's not Adar A, it's Adar B. So when you add an Adar B, an Adar Bet, a 13th month to the Hebrew calendar, then that resets that calendar. And then the next year, when the 12th month ends, the barley will be aviv, because it moves everything forward. And it resets, and then you can go year to year for several years and not have to have the 13th month. But this year, the barley was not aviv in the land of Israel, and therefore we added a 13th month. And when you add a 13th month, then the head of the year doesn't happen until a month later. So this year, the head of the month was basically at sundown on April the 7th. That was the beginning of the new Hebrew year. That was Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, the 14th of the new month and the new year, of the first month of the new year, Aviv, is Passover. And that just happens this year to fall on Easter Sunday. So this Easter, folks, it's an actual holy day. So celebrate it, enjoy it. I could tell you some things about Easter that you probably don't want to know, but I am a historian. I have to tell it straight. And quite frankly, if you want to celebrate Easter, that's fine. But Easter is the name of a pagan goddess. Her name was Ishtar. And to this day, over in Syria, Lebanon, even the land of Israel, there are people who every year celebrate Easter, and they pronounce it properly. They call it Ishtar. And they actually celebrate it with fertility eggs similar to the way we do, only over in the Middle East, all of their eggs are dyed red because it's a carryover tradition from the time when all of the eggs were dipped in the blood of innocent virgin children and sacrificed in honor of Ishtar. So when you celebrate Easter, just kind of know what you're celebrating. I have to look at Easter, and I don't see anything wrong with having kids go out and hunt Easter eggs and things of that nature. There's nothing wrong with it. The way I look at Easter now, the way I have to as a historian, is that Easter is Ishtar restitution. Whereas in ancient times, we sacrificed our children and dipped the eggs in their blood. In modern times, just sort of an in-your-face to Ishtar, in my opinion, or whatever evil power was behind that pagan religion. We celebrate our children. We send them out hunting these Easter eggs and let them eat sugary candy and have a good time on Easter and pet Easter bunnies and things of that nature. So there's really nothing wrong with it. We do not celebrate Easter the way Ishtar was celebrated, with human sacrifices and stuff. So there's nothing wrong with it. But normally during the year, you're not going to want to equate Easter with some kind of a religious holiday, my friends. Jesus did not celebrate Easter. You know, Jesus did not condone or celebrate pagan holidays or holy days. In fact, Jesus and Ishtar were opposing forces in the ancient world. So there's no reason to try and put a halo around Ishtar. There's no way to do it. The only thing we can do is kind of celebrate our children. You know, let them hunt Easter eggs, let them pet Easter bunnies, and just give them a wonderful day as sort of a counter to what a horrible day, Ishtar Day, used to be for children, if they happen to be virgin children anywhere under the age of 12. So anyway, this year on Easter Sunday, that is actually this year's Passover. So just remember the Passover. What is the Passover? Well, the Passover is a remembrance of the many times that God, in His intervention of our lives, bringing death upon the wicked, passed over the righteous. And it also represents our passing over of the Red Sea to preserve our righteous, to preserve a righteous people. The very first Passover was Melchizedek bringing forth bread and wine and sharing it with Abraham and his 120 or so servants who had gone out, and God had protected them as they waged war against armies of thousands and defeated them and brought home the prisoners and brought home all the spoil that those armies had taken from Sodom. And they saved Sodom, they saved Gomorrah. This is early. This is before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But Abram and his servants went forth and battled against the Amalekites and other kings. And God brought them through it unscathed. And Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine and shared it with Abram, and that was basically a foreshadowing, a very first Passover. Now, the first Passover that is generally considered the first one in our history was when the death angel passed over, and of course all of the messianic symbolism was present in Egypt when they killed the lamb, put the blood on the doorpost so that the angel of death would see the blood of the lamb and pass over, go past that house and take the death to the Egyptians, not to the Israelites. Now that was the original sort of celebratory or ritual Passover that we celebrate, and that whole ritual was a foreshadowing of Jesus, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, being the Passover for all mankind. So the angel of death will pass over all of us who are Christians ultimately. But anyway, now this Passover could have fallen, I'm going to talk a little more about the calendar here. This Passover could have fallen on the weekly Sabbath, on Saturday, instead of Easter Sunday. But in the land of Israel, on the evening of the 6th of April, it was overcast and they could not see the new moon. So when on the Hebrew calendar, when they cannot sight the new moon at the end of a month, then they add a day. So actually, even though all the days on the Hebrew calendar will be shown as 30-day months, all the months, will be shown as 30-day months, actually there will be some months that have 31 days, because what they do is if they can't see the new moon at the end of the month, then they just add a day, they skip a day basically per the Hebrew calendar, but basically that boils down to adding a day and having a 31-day month. But you never know when that's going to be. So in God's calendar, He made them stay a little more fast and loose. There's a little more flex to the calendar. At the end of the year, there's flex. There may be a 13th month, or there may not be. If the barley is Aviv at the end of the 12th month, then you start the new year and you go right straight with the month of Aviv, and the Passover will be 14 days later, and there you go. So there's flex there. There's the possibility that you will have to add a 13th month. At the end of each month, there's the possibility that the sky will be overcast, or that you'll be at war, or something may happen and you do not sight the new moon. If the new moon cannot be sighted from Israel, then that's not the new month. They skip a day and they defer and skip a day and start the month the next day. And that's what we had to do. This is not just Aviv B, which we had to have a 13th month and then start the month of Aviv. But at the end of the 13th month, they didn't see the new moon, so it deferred to the next day. So that moved Passover all the way up to Sunday, the 21st of April, and that's going to be Easter this year. Remember Jesus, remember crossing the Red Sea, remember Melchizedek protecting Abram and his servants as they went and rescued Lot and his family and brought back all the spoils of Sodom and defeated all their enemies. That was a Passover of sorts. Remember the angel of death and Moses and the death angel passing over all the Israelites that had the blood of the Lamb on the doorpost. Isn't that amazing, folks? All the way back in the time of Moses, God was giving us symbolism to foreshadow the death of Jesus and how his blood serves as our redemption. It's just amazing to me. That's 1,500 years before the fact. So anyway, it's a miracle, it's amazing, and this year it's the Passover. So everybody celebrate, have a great time. The holy days are to be enjoyed, folks. There is no specific format. Now, when we start celebrating these holy days as Worldwide Israel, there will be certain prayers, certain readings out of the Bible, and just a couple of little rituals. And that entire program right there won't take more than 45 minutes to an hour. And after that, there's no format. It's just a party. And these holy, the holy days last a week. Now you don't have to attend every single day of the holy days. If you've got obligations, that's fine. But as we do celebrate them, you'll want to attend as many of the days as you can, and be festive, be happy, be joyful. See the cup half full, not half empty, and be thankful to an almighty God that has blessed us with so many blessings. So just go ahead and call it Passover and observe Passover. By the way, the day after Passover, Monday, will be the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a week-long festival feast where we cut out, basically it's a spring cleaning festival. You don't eat any leavened bread, and that was a symbol, folks, for cutting out the leaven from your entire life. You trim the fat, you get rid of the clutter, you lean up, you exercise, you eat more healthy. All of these things. Every spring they had the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and their eating unleavened bread was a symbol, of course, of the Passover, but also it was a symbol of removing the leaven from your life, trimming the fat. No more powdered sugar donuts for breakfast. No more skipping the gym on a regular basis. If you normally like to think of yourself as someone who works out, and get back to working out on the week of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's the spring tone-up festival. And then, of course, 50 days after the Day of First Fruits, which is this year is going to be the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, will be the Day of First Fruits. And then 50 days after that, we have Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, which is Pentecost. And there are those who say that was the day that God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses. I'm not sure we know exactly which day that was, but we definitely know that it was the day that God gave the fire of the Holy Spirit to all of the apostles that were gathered at the temple in Jerusalem. They were gathered there because it was Shavuot. It was the Feast of Weeks. It was Pentecost. They wouldn't have been there probably if it hadn't been Shavuot. So if you don't know the holy days of God, you don't really even understand the New Testament, you don't understand why they were at the temple that day. There's so many things that have to be connected up that people don't understand. So that's kind of what the master classes are about. And so folks, click through, get your little free page of the calendar. And if you just study that calendar, it's got it all laid out. It shows day and night right at the top. And then for every day of the month, there's a little gray bar that shows our Gregorian day. And then the square that is the normal day on a calendar, that's the Hebrew day. And there's a very cool thing about the Hebrew calendar, folks. In the Hebrew calendar, a new moon is the beginning of the month, period. So every single month starts with a new moon, but we still don't get to decide. God forces us to defer to the earth, the moon, and the stars, the cosmos, to keep us on track with the Hebrew calendar. Even though each month starts with a new moon and is 30 days, we still don't get to decide. If the clouds decide to obscure the moon, then we're at their mercy, and we have to defer and skip a day and start our month the next day. If at the end of the year the barley is not Aviv, we don't get to decide. The earth decides when the head of the year will be. And to me, this is extremely interesting and very useful earth knowledge and earth science, folks. Now, just for those who don't know, the new moon is the beginning of the month. The full moon is the middle of the month. You have a new moon and it starts to wax, and it waxes up to full. The full moon is the middle of the month, and then it starts to wane, and at the end of the month, the moon will be fully waned, and then you'll get another new moon after that. So I can't tell you how many times since I started figuring the calendar this way and just kind of going by the Hebrew calendar that I've looked up, just been out in the evening or something and looked up in the sky and seen a new moon and thought, wow, it's the beginning of the month already and I didn't get this done. I'm running behind. I need to get moving. And, just from looking up at the sky, You know, and many times I've looked at, you know, a full moon and I'll say, oh my gosh, it's the middle of the month. I've already done this, I did that. Shoot, I'm way ahead. I may plan a little trip or something. It's the middle of the month here. You know, you're in harmony, folks, with the earth, the sky, the cosmos, and the stars when you follow the Hebrew calendar. When you follow the Gregorian calendar, well, it's easy to lock in, and it locks into the winter and summer solstice. I look at the Gregorian calendar as kind of like a guy that can keep a beat, but he really can't dance. So his steps are right on the beat, but he knows nothing about dancing. The Gregorian calendar is right on the mark with, you know, the summer and winter solstice, and then we have our leap year to lock it back in. And so we can plan years in advance and mark our calendar. Well, God didn't want us to do that anyway, it would appear. But now the Hebrew calendar is more like Barishnikov. He may not hit beats 1, 2, 3, 4. He may not hit one right on one, like the old guy that just keeps the beat with his feet. And he may not hit 4 right on 4. But Barishnikov can dance. He's hitting very close to 1, he's hitting very close to 4, and in the midst, he's doing a grand jeté with 3 pirouettes in l'air and coming down in a split. Now that's dancing. That's not just stomping out the beat. And that's what the Hebrew calendar kind of does. It allows us to join the divine dance, look up in the sky, and immediately know where we are in space-time, where we are in the month, where we are in the days. Whereas the Gregorian calendar, you can never do that. You have to get you a calendar and look at the numbers. It's all about the numbers on a Gregorian calendar. So, you know, if you guys want to get in harmony with the rhythms of the earth, start checking out the Hebrew calendar and doing the calendar God's way. You know, God is very, very clever, and He actually knows what works best. And the other thing about the calendar is you cannot celebrate the holy days of God unless you know when they are. And if you don't do the Hebrew calendar properly, you don't know when they are. You're celebrating all your holidays or holy days on days that really are not that special. You know, and just us saying this is our holy day, no, God has made it clear in His book that no, He wants us to keep the calendar a certain way, and He wants these days done on the day that's proper. He wants His holidays, His holy days, done right. So we're going to be concentrating on that. And this year, folks, doing it right is doing Passover right on Easter Sunday, the way people always think it is. Everybody thinks that Easter and Passover are just interchangeable. They're not by any stretch of the imagination. But anyway, be thinking in terms of Passover. And then on Monday, folks, that's the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Let's trim the fat. Let's get back to exercising, because they did this trimming of the fat because this was harvest time. You know, they were coming up on harvest time. It had been winter, and all the Israelites were about to go back to work and bust their rear end out in the fields. So, you know, they were getting lean and mean and ready to go to work. And so that's kind of the way we should look at it. And then, of course, the first fruits, you want to support wherever you get your faith from with some type of sacrifice on the day of first fruits, which is not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday. And then 50 days later, and we'll talk about that in some video, then there's going to be Pentecost, or Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. Okay, folks, we'll talk about that later. Enjoy Passover. Know that it's Passover, and that there's a great history and a miraculous history that goes along with it. And we will see you guys next time. God bless all the watchmen and all that they watch, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.